Captain Tejo had been flying ships since he was old enough to reach the controls. He was born on a station orbiting a gas giant in the Allori system, and he had spent his entire life in space. His skin was the same pale blue as all Allori, but years of radiation exposure had left faint silver lines along his arms and neck, like rivers drawn on a map. He was quiet, careful, and very good at his job. The Council trusted him with difficult missions, and he had never failed one. That was why they sent him to Sector 7. The orders came directly from Yuna's office, though the message did not carry her name. It was marked as a routine patrol. Check the area, scan for pirate activity, file a report, nothing special. But Tejo knew better. Routine patrols did not come with classified communication codes. Routine patrols did not require a crew of the best officers on the station. He stood on the bridge of his ship, the pale dawn, and watched as the stars stretched into long white lines. They were entering faster than light travel, jumping across the galaxy in a matter of hours. His crew worked quietly around him. They were a small team, 12 officers, each one experienced and loyal. Tejo had chosen them himself. "How long until we reach Sector 7?" he asked. His navigator, a young woman named Hana, checked her screens. 4 hours, Captain. Maybe less if we push the engines." "No need to push anything," Tejo said. "Let us arrive quietly." Hana nodded and turned back to her work. She was young but sharp, and she never asked questions she did not need to ask. Tejo liked that about her. The hours passed slowly. Tejo sat in his chair and read through the files that had been sent with his orders. 300 reports of strange activity. Lights, signals, vanishing ships. He read each one carefully, looking for patterns. Most of the reports came from traders and freight captains, people who had no reason to lie. They described the same thing again and again. A shape in the dark. A signal that lasted only a few seconds. A feeling of being watched. One report caught his attention. It was from a cargo ship called the Silver Wind, and it was only 6 months old. The captain of the Silver Wind had been carrying medical supplies to a colony near the edge of the Outer Rim. On the way, her ship had been attacked by pirates. 3 small fighters had come out of nowhere and opened fire. The Silver Wind's shields held, but just barely. She sent out a distress call, but no one was close enough to help. And then something happened. A ship appeared. It was black and smooth, with no markings of any kind. It was larger than the pirate fighters, but smaller than the Silver Wind. It moved faster than anything the captain had ever seen. In less than 30 seconds, all 3 pirate fighters were destroyed. Not damaged, destroyed. There was nothing left of them but dust. The black ship did not respond to any communication. It did not ask for payment or thanks. It simply turned and flew away into the dark, and within moments, it was gone from every scanner on the Silver Wind. Tejo read the report twice, then he read it a third time. The captain of the Silver Wind was a veteran, with 20 years of experience. She was not the kind of person who made things up, and she had sensor data to support her story. Although the data was strange, the black ship had left almost no energy signature. It was as if it barely existed at all. "Captain," Hana said suddenly, "we are entering Sector 7. Through the front windows of the bridge, he could see the stars returning to their normal positions as the ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Sector 7 looked like any other part of space, dark, quiet, and full of distant stars. But there was something about it that made the back of his neck feel cold. "Begin scanning," he ordered. "Full range. I want to see everything." The crew worked quickly. Screens filled with data. Temperature readings, radiation levels, gravitational fields. Everything looked normal. There was nothing out here but empty space and a few dead rocks floating in the void. For 2 days, they found nothing. They flew in wide circles, scanning every direction. They checked asteroid fields and gas clouds, and the empty spaces in between. There was nothing unusual. No ships, no signals, no strange lights. Taeho began to wonder if he was wasting his time. On the third day, Hana found something. "Captain," she said, her voice very quiet. "I am picking up a signal." Taeho walked to her station and looked at the screen. There was a faint line on the display, a signal so weak that it was almost invisible against the background noise of space. It pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. "What frequency?" Taeho asked. Hana shook her head. "That is the strange thing, Captain. It is not on any known frequency. I have never seen anything like it. The pattern does not match any species in the database." Taeho stared at the signal. It was beautiful, in a strange way. A slow, steady pulse that seemed almost alive. "Can you trace the source?" "I am trying," Hana said. Her fingers moved quickly across her controls. "It is coming from deep in the sector, very deep, near the coordinates of the old human homeworld. Everyone had heard the stories. Everyone knew what was supposed to be out there. Nothing. A dead planet orbiting a dying star. The grave of a forgotten species." "Set a course," Taeho said. They flew for 6 more hours. The signal grew stronger as they got closer, but it was still faint, hidden, as if whoever was sending it did not want to be found by just anyone. Taeho noticed that the signal changed slightly as they moved. It was not just pulsing. It was adjusting, responding. "It knows we are here," Hana whispered. Taeho did not answer. He stood at the window and watched the darkness ahead. There was nothing to see, just stars and empty space. But the signal kept pulsing, steady and patient, like something waiting. Then the lights appeared. They were small at first, tiny points of blue light, scattered across the darkness like fireflies. Taeho counted 5, then 10, then 20. They were not stars. Stars did not move. These lights were drifting slowly, forming patterns that changed every few seconds. "Are those ships?" someone on the bridge asked. "I do not know," Hana said. Her voice was shaking. "The scanners cannot read them. They have no energy signature, no heat, no radiation. According to our instruments, those lights do not exist." But they were there. Taeho could see them with his own eyes. Dozens of lights, moving together in perfect silence. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. One of the lights broke away from the others. It moved toward the pale dawn slowly, as if it was being careful. As it got closer, Taeho could see that it was not just a light. It was a ship. It was black and smooth, just like the one described in the Silver Wind's report. It had no windows, no markings, no visible engines. It simply moved through space as if it belonged there, as if it were part of the darkness itself. The ship stopped about 100 meters from the pale dawn. It hung there in silence, facing them. "They are scanning us," Hana said. "I can feel it in the instruments. Something is reading our entire ship, every system, every file, every communication we have ever sent." Taeho's heart was beating fast, but he kept his voice calm. "Open a communication channel, all frequencies." Hana did as he asked. The channel opened with a soft hiss of static. "This is Captain Taeho of the Galactic Council vessel Pale Dawn," he said. "We are on a peaceful mission. Please identify yourselves." There was a long silence. The black ship hung motionless in the dark. Then, very softly, a voice came through the speakers. It was calm and clear, speaking perfect galactic common, with an accent that no one on the bridge had ever heard before. "We know who you are, Captain. We have been watching you for a long time." The channel went dead. The lights disappeared. The black ship was gone. And Sector 7 was quiet again, as if nothing had ever been there at all. Taeho stood frozen at the window, staring into the empty dark. His hands were shaking. Behind him, his crew sat in stunned silence. No one moved, No one spoke. Finally, Hana turned to him. Her face was pale. "Captain," she said softly, "what do we do?" Taeho took a slow breath. He looked at the empty space where the lights had been. Then he turned to face his crew. "We go back," he said, "and we tell the council that the myths are real." The council chamber had never been this full. Every seat was taken. Every screen in the station was tuned to the live broadcast. Species that had not spoken to each other in centuries sat side by side, all of them watching, all of them waiting. The air was thick with fear and excitement, and the sharp smell of 100 different alien bodies pressed together in one room. Taeho had delivered his report 3 days ago. He had stood before the council and told them everything: the signal, the lights, the black ship, and the voice that spoke perfect galactic common. He had played the recording. He had shown the sensor data. And for the first time in her long career, Yuna had nothing to say. She had sat in her seat with her dark eyes wide open, and her hands folded tight in her lap, and she had listened without speaking a single word. The galaxy had not taken the news well. Some species panicked. Some refused to believe it. The communication networks were full of arguments and theories and wild guesses. Everyone had an opinion, and no one had answers. Then, exactly 24 hours ago, the answers came. A single ship appeared above the council station. It did not come from any direction that the defense systems could detect. It was simply not there one moment, and then it was there the next, hanging in space like it had always existed. It was black and smooth, larger than any of the ships Taeho had seen in Sector 7. It was shaped like a long blade, narrow and elegant, and it caught the light of nearby stars along its edges, like a knife catching sunlight. Every weapon on the station locked onto it immediately. Fighters launched from the docking bays, defense shields powered up to maximum. The station's commander sent a message on all frequencies, demanding identification. The response came in perfect galactic common, spoken by a woman's voice that was calm and clear, and carried no trace of fear. "This is Commander Sujin of the Human Federation vessel Quiet Sky. I am here to speak with your council. I carry no weapons, and I mean no harm. I request permission to board your station." The station commander looked at Yuna. Yuna looked at Taeho. Taeho looked at the ship floating outside the window, and said, "Let her in." It took an hour for the docking procedures to be completed. Security teams lined every corridor from the docking bay to the council chamber. Soldiers with heavy weapons stood at every door. Scanners checked for explosives, chemicals, radiation, and 100 other dangers. They found nothing. The ship was clean. Its hull was made of a material that no scanner could identify. It had no visible engines, no fuel tanks, no weapon systems. It was, by every measure the station could apply, impossible. The docking bay doors opened, and Sujin walked out. She was smaller than most of the aliens expected. Humans, according to the old records, had been an average-sized species, and Sujin was average even by human standards. She was not tall. She was not physically impressive. She wore a simple dark uniform with no decorations or badges. Her black hair was pulled back from her face, and her eyes were dark and steady. She looked like someone who had all the time in the world and knew exactly what she was going to do with it. She walked through the corridors of the station without hurrying. The security teams watched her with their weapons ready, but she did not seem to notice them. She looked at the walls, the lights, the architecture, the way a visitor might look at an old museum, with interest, but not with surprise. When she reached the council chamber, she stopped at the entrance and looked up at the thousands of faces staring down at her. For a moment, the entire room held its breath. Then Sujin smiled, a small, quiet smile, and walked to the center of the floor. "Thank you for receiving me," she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried perfectly in the huge chamber. The sound systems were designed for voices much louder than hers, but somehow her words filled every corner of the room. "I know this is unexpected. I know you have questions. I will do my best to answer them. Yuna stood first. Her hands were steady, but Taeho could see the tension in her shoulders. You say you are human, Yuna said. Our records show that humanity destroyed itself 10,000 years ago. Your planet is dead. How is this possible? Sujin looked up at Yuna for a long moment before answering. Your records are wrong, she said simply. We did not destroy ourselves. We almost did. That part of the story is true. We fought terrible wars. We damaged our world beyond repair. Millions died. It was the worst time in our history. She paused. The chamber was completely silent. But we survived, she continued. Not all of us, not even most of us, but enough. The survivors went underground. They went into the oceans. They went into space. Not far, just to the moon, to the asteroids, to the places close enough to reach with the little technology they had left. And they hid. Hid from what? Yuna asked. From everything, Sujin said. From the galaxy, from the other species who might have come to finish what we started. From ourselves, in a way. We were ashamed of what we had done. We were broken and afraid, so we stayed quiet. We rebuilt in silence. And we waited. Waited for what? Another council member asked. Sujin turned to look at the speaker. We did not know at first. We just waited because we were not ready. We were like children who had burned down their own house. We needed time to grow up. There was a ripple of murmuring across the chamber. Some species looked offended at the comparison. A species that had nearly killed itself was now standing in their chamber, speaking to them as equals. How long did you hide? Taeho asked from his seat. He had been given a temporary place in the chamber to observe the proceedings. Sujin looked at him. There was a flash of recognition in her eyes. She knew who he was. She knew he had been the one in Sector 7. We hid for about 3,000 years, she said. During that time, we rebuilt everything from nothing. We developed new technology. We learned from our mistakes. We changed. Changed how? Yuna asked. Sujin reached into her pocket and took out a small object. It looked like a smooth black stone, no bigger than her thumb. She held it up, and it began to glow with a soft blue light. The light spread outward, and suddenly the entire chamber was filled with images, stars, planets, nebulae, structures of impossible size, floating in the hearts of suns. We learned to build inside stars, Sujin said. We learned to fold space. We learned to create matter from energy and energy from thought. We are not the same species that burned its world 10,000 years ago. We kept our shape, our languages, our names, but everything else changed. The images faded, the small stone went dark, and Sujin put it back in her pocket. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Thousands of the galaxy's most powerful beings sat motionless, staring at the small woman standing alone on the chamber floor. She had shown them things that even the most advanced species in the council could not begin to understand. Technology that should not exist. Power that should not be possible. Yuna slowly sat down. Her face was very still, but her eyes were wide. Why are you here now? She asked. After 10,000 years of silence, why have you come to us? Sujin's expression changed. The calm confidence faded just a little, replaced by something harder, something worried. Because something is coming, she said, something from outside this galaxy. We have been watching it for 500 years. It is a fleet, larger than anything you have ever seen, larger than anything we have ever seen, and it is heading straight for this part of space. The chamber exploded into noise. Species shouted at each other. Some demanded proof. Some demanded that Sujin be arrested. Some simply sat in shock, unable to process what they were hearing. Sujin stood in the middle of it all, calm and patient, waiting for the noise to die down. When it finally did, she spoke again. We did not come here to frighten you, she said. We came here because you deserve to know, and because for the first time in 10,000 years, we cannot face what is coming alone." She looked around the chamber one last time. "We are asking for your help, and we are offering ours." The chamber was silent again. Tejo watched from his seat, his heart pounding. He looked at Yuna. She looked back at him, and for the first time since he had known her, he saw something in her eyes that he had never seen before. Hope and terror, mixed together so tightly that it was impossible to tell them apart. Sujin stood still on the chamber floor, a small figure in a room full of giants, and she waited for the galaxy to decide what it believed. The days after Sujin's speech were the most chaotic the Galactic Council had ever known. Arguments broke out between species that had been peaceful allies for centuries. Emergency sessions ran through the night without stopping. Communication channels across the galaxy were so overloaded that some of them crashed entirely. Everyone was talking. Nobody was agreeing. Some species believed Sujin. They had seen the images. They had read Tejo's report. They had heard the stories from Sector 7 for years, and now they had proof. Humans were alive. They were powerful beyond understanding, and they were warning the galaxy about a coming threat. These species wanted to listen. Other species did not believe. They called it a trick, a performance designed to frighten the Council into giving humans power and influence they had not earned. How could anyone trust a species that had hidden in the shadows for 10,000 years? A species that had watched the galaxy struggle and grow and fight its own wars, without ever offering a hand? These species wanted Sujin arrested and her ship taken apart for study. And some species were simply afraid. Not of the coming threat, not of the humans, but of what the humans represented, a power so far beyond their own, that it made everything they had built feel small and fragile and temporary. Yuna was trying to hold it all together, and she was failing. She sat in her office late at night, surrounded by reports and messages and demands from 100 different governments. Her eyes were tired, her hands ached from typing. She had not slept in 2 days. A soft knock came at her door. "Come in," she said without looking up. The door opened, and Sujin walked in. She was alone. She had refused all security escorts, and after 3 days on the station, the guards had mostly stopped following her. Their weapons could not hurt her, and their scanners could not even fully detect her. She moved through the station like a ghost, polite, quiet, and completely beyond anyone's control. "You look tired," Sujin said. Yuna finally looked up. "I am tired," she admitted. "Your arrival has caused more problems than I can count." Sujin sat down in the chair across from Yuna's desk. "I know, I am sorry for that, but I could not wait any longer." "The threat you mentioned," Yuna said. "You need to show us more. The Council will not act on words alone. They need proof." "I know," Sujin said. "That is why I brought someone with me." She reached for her communication device and spoke a few words in a language Yuna had never heard. It was soft and flowing, with sounds that seemed to overlap and blend together. A few moments later, the door opened again, and a man walked in. He was taller than her, with broad shoulders and a calm face. His eyes were dark brown, and his hands were large and steady, the hands of someone who worked with tools and machines. He wore the same simple dark uniform as Sujin, but there was something clipped to his belt that glowed faintly with blue light. "This is Ji-hoon," Sujin said. "He is our chief engineer. He can show you what we know." Ji-hoon nodded politely at Yuna. "Ambassador," he said. His voice was deep and warm, and he spoke Galactic Common with the same strange accent as Sujin. "I understand the Council needs evidence. I am happy to provide it." Yuna studied him for a moment. Then she stood. "Come with me, both of you." She led them to the Council's main science hall, a massive room filled with the most advanced equipment the galaxy had to offer. Holographic displays covered the walls. Computing systems the size of buildings hummed with power. The best scientists from a dozen species were already gathered there, called by Yuna's message an hour earlier. They watched with wide eyes as two humans walked into their laboratory. Ji-hoon looked around the room with interest, the same way Sujin had looked at the station's corridors, like someone visiting a museum of old things. He touched one of the holographic displays and tilted his head. "This is good work," he said kindly. "Very clever design." One of the scientists, a tall being with 6 eyes and thin silver arms, stepped forward. "Who are you to judge our technology?" she asked sharply. Ji-hoon did not seem offended. He simply unclipped the glowing device from his belt and placed it on the nearest table. "May I?" he asked, looking at Yuna. Yuna nodded. Ji-hoon touched the device, and the room changed. The walls disappeared. The ceiling vanished. Every person in the room was suddenly standing in open space, surrounded by stars and galaxies that stretched in every direction. It was not a projection or a hologram. It felt real. Yuna could feel the cold of space on her skin. She could see individual stars burning billions of light years away. She reached out her hand, and her fingers passed through a nebula that shimmered with purple and gold light. "This is a window," Ji-hoon said. His voice came from everywhere and nowhere. "It lets you see any point in the universe in real time. Not a recording, not a simulation. You are looking at the actual universe as it exists right now." The scientists were frozen. Some of them had tears in their eyes. They had spent their entire lives studying the universe through telescopes and sensors and mathematical models. Now they were standing inside it. Ji-hoon moved his hand, and the view shifted. The stars blurred and streamed past like rivers of light. And then they stopped. They were looking at something dark. Something enormous. It was a fleet. Ships beyond counting filled the space ahead of them. They were ugly and brutal, all sharp angles and heavy armor, covered in spikes and weapons that pulsed with a sickly red light. They moved in a formation so tight and so perfect that they looked like a single living organism, a swarm of metal and fire crawling across the universe. "This is what is coming," Ji-hoon said quietly. "We call them the Hollow. We do not know where they come from. We do not know what they want. What we know is this: they have destroyed every galaxy they have ever entered. Every star, every planet, every living thing. They leave nothing behind." The view zoomed in on one of the ships. Up close, it was even more terrifying. Its surface was covered with marks and scars, not from battle, but from age. This fleet had been traveling for millions of years, destroying everything in its path, and it had never been stopped. "How long until they reach us?" Yuna asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "At their current speed, approximately 18 months, Ji-hoon said. The room erupted. Scientists shouted questions. Some of them ran to their equipment, trying to verify what they were seeing. Others simply stood and stared at the fleet with horror on their faces. Ji-hoon let them look for a long time. Then he touched his device again, and the room returned to normal. The walls came back. The ceiling reappeared. The cold of space was replaced by the warm air of the laboratory. But no one felt warm anymore. "Your technology," the six-eyed scientist said slowly. She was looking at Ji-hoon with an expression that mixed wonder and fear in equal parts. "It is beyond anything we can measure. Your ships, your weapons, your knowledge of the universe. How far ahead of us are you?" Ji-hoon thought about the question carefully. "That is hard to answer," he said. "We took a different path. After we nearly destroyed ourselves, we decided to stop building weapons and start understanding the universe itself. We learned how matter works at its deepest level. We learned how space bends and folds. We learned how time moves and how energy thinks. It was not about being ahead. It was about being different." He paused and looked at Sujin. She nodded slightly. "But to answer your question honestly," Ji-hoon said, "if we compare what we can do to what you can do right now, the gap is very large. Your fastest ships would take years to cross what we cross in seconds. Your strongest weapons would not scratch the hull of the smallest hollow vessel. Your best shields would fail in the first minute of battle. The silence that followed was heavy and painful. Every scientist in the room understood what Ji-hoon was saying. The entire military force of the Galactic Council, thousands of fleets from hundreds of species, was meaningless against what was coming. Then why do you need us? Yuna asked. It was the question everyone was thinking. Sujin answered, because we are powerful, but we are few. There are not many humans, Ambassador. We chose quality over quantity a long time ago. We can fight the Hollow, but we cannot be everywhere at once. We cannot protect every planet, every station, every colony. We need you to protect your own people while we fight. We need your ships, your soldiers, your knowledge of this galaxy. We have the technology. You have the numbers. She stepped forward and looked directly into Yuna's eyes. We hid for 10,000 years because we were ashamed and afraid. We are not hiding anymore. But we cannot do this alone. No one can. She looked at the scientists, who were still trembling from what they had seen. Then she picked up her communication device and opened a channel to the full council. Emergency session, she said. All members, immediately. We have work to do. 18 months passed faster than anyone thought possible. The galaxy had never worked together like this before. Species that had fought wars against each other now shared blueprints and resources. Factories on 1,000 worlds ran day and night, building ships, shields, weapons, and armor, using designs that Ji-hoon's team had given them. The technology was simplified. Humans had stripped it down to levels that other species could understand and build. But even the simplified versions were more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever produced. Taeho had been promoted. He was no longer a captain of a single ship. The council had made him fleet coordinator, the officer responsible for organizing the combined military forces of every species in the galaxy. It was the largest fleet ever assembled, and it was his job to make sure it could fight as one. He stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Dawnbreaker, and looked at the tactical display. 12,000 ships floated in formation around the council station. Warships, carriers, destroyers, medical vessels, supply transports, every type of ship from every corner of the galaxy. Some were beautiful and sleek. Some were heavy and ugly. Some were so strange that Taeho could not tell which end was the front. But they were all here, and they were all ready. Or at least, they said they were ready. Taeho knew the truth. He had studied the data Ji-hoon had provided. He had seen the simulations. The Council's fleet was strong by galactic standards, but against the Hollow, it would not last long. Their job was not to win the war. Their job was to hold the line, to protect the civilian populations, to guard the evacuation routes, to buy time for the ones who could actually fight. The humans. Sujin had been busy during the 18 months. She had traveled to every major planet in the galaxy, meeting with leaders, inspecting defenses, and coordinating plans. She never raised her voice. She never gave orders. She simply explained what needed to be done and let people decide for themselves. And somehow, they always decided to follow her suggestions. Ji-hoon had spent the time in laboratories and shipyards, working alongside alien scientists and engineers. He was patient and kind, always willing to explain things a second or third time when someone did not understand. He treated the other species' technology with respect, even when it was thousands of years behind his own. He found clever ways to combine human technology with alien designs, creating hybrid systems that were stronger than either one alone. And then, on a quiet morning, exactly 18 months and 3 days after Sujin first walked into the council chamber, the Hollow arrived. They came from above the galactic plane, a direction that no one ever watched, because nothing had ever come from there before. The first sensors to detect them were deep space arrays on the outer rim, and what they showed made experienced officers turn pale. The Hollow Fleet was enormous. Not thousands of ships, not tens of thousands, millions. They covered the scanner displays like a dark stain spreading across clean water. They moved in perfect formation, and they moved fast. Tahoe received the alert on his bridge. He read the numbers 3 times, because he could not believe them the first 2. Then he opened a channel to every ship in his fleet. All units, this is Fleet Coordinator Tahoe. The enemy has been detected. This is not a drill. Move to your assigned positions and prepare for combat. Protect the civilian corridors at all costs. Do not engage the main fleet directly. Hold the line. He closed the channel and stood in silence for a moment. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, preparing systems and running final checks. Hana was at her navigation station, her face calm and focused. She had come with him from the pale dawn, and he was glad she was here. "Where are the humans?" Hana asked softly. Tahoe looked at his display. There was no sign of the human fleet. No ships, no signals, nothing. He felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "I do not know," he said. The Hollow reached the outer rim in 6 hours. The first battles began at the edge of Council space, where defense stations and patrol fleets tried to slow the advance. They failed. The Hollow ships were faster, stronger, and more numerous than anyone had prepared for. Defense stations were torn apart in minutes. Patrol fleets scattered or were destroyed. The reports that came in were short and desperate, calls for help that cut off in the middle of sentences. Tahoe moved his fleet to the second defense line, closer to the Council station. He arranged his ships in a wide formation, spreading them across the most likely approach routes. He knew it was not enough. He knew that when the Hollow reached them, the battle would be short. But he also knew that behind him were billions of civilians being evacuated to safe zones deep in the galaxy's core. Every minute he held the line was another minute for those people to reach safety. Every minute mattered. The Hollow appeared on his forward scanners at sunset, or what would have been sunset if they had been on a planet. A wall of ships, stretching from one edge of the display to the other, moving toward them with terrible, steady speed. "All units, weapons ready," Tahoe said. His voice was calm. His hands were not. "Fire on my command." The Hollow ships came closer. Tahoe could see them through the front windows now. Dark shapes against the stars, blocking out the light one section at a time. The galaxy was disappearing behind them. "Captain," Hana said suddenly, "I am detecting something." "What is it?" "A signal. The same signal from Sector 7. But stronger. Much stronger." Tahoe turned to look at her display. The signal was there, the same slow, steady pulse he had heard 18 months ago in the darkness of Sector 7. But now, it was not faint. It was powerful. It filled every frequency and every scanner on every ship in the fleet. And then the dark space behind the Hollow fleet began to glow. It started as a thin line of blue light, stretching across the entire width of the enemy formation. The line grew brighter, wider, until it looked like a crack in the fabric of space itself. And through that crack, ships began to appear. Human ships. They came in silence, one after another, sliding out of the blue light like shadows stepping into the sun. They were black, and smooth, and beautiful, and they were enormous. The smallest of them was larger than anything in the Council's fleet. The largest were the size of moons, vast, impossible structures that moved with the grace of living things. 10,000. 10,000 warships, each one carrying technology that the rest of the galaxy could not even understand, rose from the darkness behind the Hollow fleet like a wall of midnight and blue fire. "By the stars," Hana whispered. Tears were running down her face. She was not the only one. Sujin's voice came through every speaker on every ship in the galaxy. It was calm, clear, and carried the weight of 10,000 years of silence finally being broken. This is Commander Sujin of the Human Federation. To the Allied fleet, hold your positions and protect the evacuation routes. We will handle the rest. She paused. When she spoke again, her voice was harder, colder. The voice of a species that had nearly destroyed itself and had spent 10,000 years making sure it would never be that weak again. To the Hollow Fleet, you have entered our galaxy. You have threatened our friends. You will go no further. There was no countdown, no dramatic pause. The ships simply surged forward, and the battle began. Taeho had seen combat before. He had fought pirates and border skirmishes, and one small war that lasted 3 months. Nothing in his experience prepared him for what he saw that day. The human ships moved through the Hollow Fleet like wind through leaves. They were faster, more agile, and more devastating than anything Taeho could have imagined. Beams of blue light cut through Hollow ships like they were made of paper. Shields that could withstand the full firepower of the Council's fleet shattered in seconds under human weapons. The Hollow fought back. They were not weak, and their numbers were staggering. But for every human ship that was hit, 100 Hollow ships were destroyed. The battle lasted 12 hours. When it was over, the Hollow fleet was gone. Not defeated, not retreating. Gone. Destroyed so completely that there was nothing left but dust and cooling energy. The darkness that had covered the stars was replaced by empty space, clean and quiet and full of light. Taeho stood on his bridge and watched the human fleet slow to a stop. The blue light on their hulls pulsed gently, like a heartbeat returning to rest. His crew was silent. Some of them were crying, some of them were laughing, some were doing both. Yuna's voice came through the communication channel. She was in the council chamber, and Taeho could hear the noise of thousands of beings cheering in the background. Her voice was shaking, but she was smiling. He could hear the smile even through the static. "Fleet Coordinator Taeho," she said. "Civilian evacuations are complete. All populations are safe. No civilian casualties." He let out a breath that he felt like he had been holding for 18 months. "Acknowledged, Ambassador," he said. He opened his eyes and looked out the window one more time. The human fleet hung in the darkness, silent and still. Among them, somewhere, Sujin and Jihoon were aboard their ships, probably already planning their next move, already thinking about the future. They had come back. After 10,000 years of silence, after being forgotten and dismissed and called myths by every living species in the galaxy, they had come back. Not for power, not for revenge, not for glory. They came back because someone needed help. Taeho smiled. He looked at Hana, who was wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Set a course for the council station," he said. "I think we have a lot to talk about." Hana laughed. It was a good sound, warm and alive and full of relief. "I think we do." The Dawnbreaker turned slowly and began its journey home, surrounded by the ships of 100 species, all of them flying together for the first time. Behind them, the human fleet began to fade, their ships slipping back into the quiet darkness where they had lived for so long. But this time, everyone knew they were there. And this time, no one would forget. The Galactic Council Chamber was the largest room ever built by any living species. It floated at the center of a space station the size of a small moon. And its walls were made of glass that looked out into the stars. Thousands of seats rose in circles from the floor to the ceiling, and every seat belonged to a different species from a different world. Some were tall and thin with silver skin. Some were short and wide with 4 arms. Some floated in water tanks because they could not breathe air. But all of them came here for the same reason: to talk, to argue, and to decide the future of the galaxy. Yuna sat in one of the highest seats. She was not tall, but she carried herself like someone who did not need height to be powerful. Her skin was a pale blue, and her eyes were large and dark like deep water. She was the ambassador of the Allori people, and she had held her seat on the council for 47 years. In that time, she had seen wars begin and end. She had watched empires fall. She had signed treaties that saved billions of lives. Very little surprised her anymore. Today, the council was discussing trade routes near the outer rim of the galaxy. It was boring work, but important. Ships carried food and medicine and technology between planets, and if the routes were not safe, people suffered. Yuna listened carefully as a merchant from the Borai system complained about delays and lost cargo. "Something is wrong in Sector 7, the merchant said. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "My ships go in, and they come out late. Sometimes, they do not come out at all." The council murmured. Lost ships were not unusual. Space was dangerous. There were asteroid fields, radiation storms, and pirates who hid in the dark places between stars. But the merchant was not finished. "My captains say they see things," he continued. "Lights in the dark. Shapes that move too fast. One of my pilots said he saw a ship that was not in any database. It was black, and it made no sound on any scanner, and then it was gone." The murmuring grew louder. Yuna leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes for a moment. She had heard stories like this before. Every few years someone came to the council with tales of ghost ships and phantom signals. It was always the same. Traders who spent too long in deep space started seeing things that were not there. Loneliness did strange things to the mind. "Ambassador Yuna," the council speaker said, turning to her, "you oversee the Outer Rim territories. What is your opinion?" Yuna stood slowly. She looked down at the merchant with a kind but firm expression. "I understand your concern," she said. "Space is vast, and the Outer Rim is the most empty part of it. There are no colonies there, no stations, no reason for any ship to be in that area. What your pilots saw was most likely a reflection from a nearby nebula, or perhaps a sensor error caused by radiation." The merchant shook his head. "My pilots are experienced. They know what a reflection looks like." "I do not doubt their experience," Yuna replied, "but I do doubt the existence of invisible ships that appear and disappear like magic. There is no species in this galaxy that has such technology, and the old myths about creatures hiding in the dark corners of space are just that, myths." She paused and looked around the chamber. Every eye was on her. 10,000 years ago, she said, there was a species on a small planet in the Outer Rim. They called themselves humans. They were young and violent and curious, and they fought wars among themselves before they ever reached the stars. Our records say they destroyed their own world. They are gone, extinct, and yet every few years someone claims to have seen a human ship. A ghost from a dead civilization. She smiled. It was a gentle smile, but there was no doubt in it. There are no humans, there are no ghost ships. There is only empty space and overactive imaginations. I suggest we return to the matter of trade routes. The council agreed. The merchant sat down, looking unhappy, but unable to argue with someone as respected as Yuna. The discussion moved on to taxes and shipping fees, and within an hour, everyone had forgotten about the strange lights in Sector 7. But Yuna had not forgotten, not completely. Later that evening, she sat alone in her private office aboard the station. The room was small and simple, a desk, a chair, and a window that looked out at the stars. She liked to sit here at the end of the day and think. Tonight, her thoughts kept returning to the merchant's words. She opened her personal terminal and searched the council archives for Sector 7 anomalies. The results were longer than she expected. Over the past 200 years, there had been more than 300 reports of strange activity in that sector. Lights, signals, ships that appeared on scanners for a few seconds and then vanished. Most of the reports had been dismissed. Sensor errors, they said. Space debris. Imagination. But 300 reports was a lot of imagination. Yuna scrolled deeper into the archives. She found older records, much older. 5,000 years ago, a survey team had been sent to explore the area where Earth once existed. They found the planet, but it was empty. The oceans were gone. The cities were dust. There was nothing alive on the surface. The team took samples, wrote their report, and left. The file was marked closed. No further action. She stared at the report for a long time. The survey team had only checked the surface. They had not looked underground. They had not scanned the deep oceans that might have been hidden beneath the dust. They had not checked the dark side of the moon or the asteroid belt, or any of the 100 other places where a desperate species might hide. Because why would they? Humans were dead. Everyone knew that. Yuna closed her terminal and stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, in the cold and quiet dark of Sector 7, something was happening. Something that no one wanted to talk about. She told herself it was nothing. She told herself the myths were just myths. She told herself that humans were gone and would never come back. But as she stood there in the silence of her office, looking out at the endless black sky, she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt afraid. Not of what was out there, but of what it might mean if the stories were true, if the ghost ships were real, if the species the galaxy had forgotten was not gone at all. She shook her head and turned away from the window. Impossible, she whispered to herself. But the word felt hollow, and the stars outside her window kept shining, cold and silent, keeping their secrets the way they always had.